Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We tested this
I
out.
know we practiced.
All right, there we go. Maybe. Does that look all right?
Yeah, I think it's coming over. Okay, got it.
Great. All right. Thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you. I'm Melinda Kaufman. I'm the program coordinator for the USDA SBIR program. That's my email. And we also have a general SBIR box that is manned by 2 excellent program specialists who can answer as many, if not more, questions than I do. So please feel free to contact us. Again, thank you for inviting us to the Hawaii Technology Development Center. We're very excited to do this and hope to develop an ongoing relationship with you. So I'm going to just take a few seconds and talk a little bit about SBIR program goals. And this applies to all SBIR programs, not just USDA program. So, the idea behind it is to stimulate scientific and technological innovations in the private sector of the United States. And that is done through small business. So at the same time, it's strengthening the role of small business in the United States. And then we also want to increase commercialization, very importantly, commercialization of these innovations. So it's trying to do a lot of things at once, but I think we do it well. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, we would want to foster and encourage participation by historically underserved populations. We're doing, outreach and encouraging small business owners from historically underserved populations to submit a proposal to USDA, because we want to increase the number of proposals and therefore the number of awards. That's very important to us. The USDA has a non-discrimination statement. This is a long statement. We're not going to go all the way through it. It includes, race, gender, religion, disability status, marital status, all those things. This will be available if Cindy wants. I will send out the slides, and then you'll have this to look at your leisure. So we have 3 phases. And we fund 2 of them. I'll be clear about that right up front. There are 3 phases that we fund 2. So we fund phase 1, which is used to establish the technical merit of your proposal and to help through a proof of concept research project to establish the feasibility of your innovation. And then phase 2 is to continue some of the research and development that was initiated in phase 1. And then it's also to really start pushing that technology or innovation out into commercialization, out into the market. Phase 3, again, is not funded, but phase 3 is meant to continue the commercialization efforts. For USDA SBIR, the annual budget is around $30 million. And for phase 1, we have, and we'll talk about them, but we have 10 topic areas. And they range, the award amount ranges from $125,000 to $175,000. Of those 10 topic areas, 8 of them are at $175,000 and 2 of them are at $125,000. Phase 1 is 8 months. However, it's very easy to get a no-cost extension. So you can easily get a 12-month no-cost extension, giving you 20 months. You don't have to use the whole 12 months, but that's very easy to get if your project needs it for whatever reason. And then phase 2, all of the topic areas are funded at 600,000 or less. If you come in less, that's fine too, but 600,000, and those run 24 months. So just to give you a little bit of an idea about the competitiveness and the success rate for applicants in FY20, there was a 16% award rate for phase 1, and in FY21, there was 15%. So we hover right in there. Usually we just say we have a 15% success rate. And for phase 2, it's much higher. It's important to know that you can only apply to phase 2 if you are a phase 1 award recipient. So that's just, there's no straight to phase 2 for USDA. Some other SBIR agencies do have a straight to phase 2, but we do not. But as you can see in FY20, there was a 43% award rate, and in FY21, there was a 48% award rate. And here are just some success metrics that we look at in the USDA SBIR program. We look at success through, the sales of technology and services of your innovation, licenses to your innovation, and the number of new jobs created due to your innovation. So those are some of the metrics that we look at. And then some of the features of the SBIR program. All the ideas are investigator initiated. And then the awards are based on, of course, the scientific and technical merit of your project, the commercial potential of the innovation. We want to make sure that it is marketable, that there is a market out there. And we also look at the PI and the company qualifications. We encourage subcontracting to university and USDA labs or federal labs. It's something we really encourage you to do. It's permitted and encouraged. And we also offer technical and business assistance, which I'll talk about next. So what is technical and business assistance? TABA, or TABA, however you want to pronounce it. It was first introduced as part of the John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019. And it was introduced to, since SBIR is science-based, science and technology focused, then it was introduced to bring some, business expertise to the scientists who are creating these innovations that are important for the American public. So TABA can include things. This is just a small list of what it can include, but it can include assistance with IP legal costs, financial review, funding strategies, marketing, that type of thing. But there is a really extensive list of ways that it can assist a small business owner with an innovation. So for TABA, the budget for TABA for USDA SBIR, for phase 1, it's $6,500. And that is basically to help develop a pretty comprehensive commercialization plan for your application for phase 2. So in phase 1, you're kind of working on the proof of concept, but you also are building your proposal for phase 2. And so that $6,500 is to help you create a proposal for commercialization for phase 2. And then if you win a phase 2, the amount for TABA is $50,000. And that is meant to really, step on the gas for commercialization and to help you really get your innovation into that market. Both of these, I want to emphasize, this does not come out of your budget. So that $125 to $175 in phase 1, the $6,500 for TABA is on top of that. USDA pays for that. It's not coming from your budget. And same thing for phase 2. The $600,000 for phase 2 is yours for your budget. $50,000 USDA pays for these TABA services. So I want to talk for a moment about our topic areas. We have 10 topic areas. They are quite broad, and they're broad for a reason. They're broad because we want to capture innovation, and it's hard to anticipate what all innovations are going to be like. So they're broad, and sometimes I will admit that creates some confusions. People have innovations that fit into more than one topic area, but if that's the case, we have an SBIR national program leader that you can consult with. His name is Dr. David Songstad, and he is very familiar with the scientific aspects of each topic area, and you can consult with him, and he can give you some guidance or at least some ideas about which topic area your innovation might where your innovation might best fit. But as you can see, we have everything from forest and related resources. We have 2 categories for plant production and protection. One focuses on biology and the other on engineering. Of course, we have animal production and protection, conservation of natural resources, water, soil, air, food and nutrition science is the big topic area. We're lucky today to have Dr. Tim Sullivan here to talk about aquaculture, which is really important to Hawaii. And so you'll be hearing from him after I am done, and we're all looking forward to that. We also have biofuels and bio-based products. And then we have the 2 that are more in a lighter blue or gray color, which is 8.6 and 8.12, rural and community development and small and mid-sized farms. These are the 2 that are funded at $125,000 versus $175,000. So all in the darker blue are funded at $175,000. The lighter is $125,000. And those 2 topic areas are just a little bit different than the other 8 in that you don't have to have a completely new innovation in order to apply to 8.6 or 8.12. You can use off-the-shelf technology as long as you apply it in a new way. And the innovation is in the way that you are going to apply the technology. So those 2 stand out for those reasons. And this slide is just to remind everyone that agriculture is very much a science-based field. And so we're not just limited to cows and chickens and crops. We do everything, and so this is not in any way a comprehensive list, but we do everything, from nanotechnologies to acoustics, biofuels, genetic engineering. If you have a scientific innovation that you're excited about, that it might be worth taking some time to think about whether or not there is an agricultural application for your innovation, because there very well might be. And so please think of us as a scientific field, because we are. Now, this is just a little bit about the timeline for our phases. And this is what I have to say, that this is what we shoot for every year. And we usually meet the target, but there are sometimes delays. Last year we had some delays, but this is the ideal. So this year right now we're on track to release the FY23 phase 1 USDA SBIR RFA in July. And then that would be a close in early October of this year. Then our panels, our peer review panels, would be held in December and January, December of 22, January 23. And then awards would be given in July and June of 23. You'd be notified of your award much sooner than that, probably in March and April, but the awards would actually be given in June and July. So that's the timeline, that's the ideal timeline that we try to hit. I can't promise that it will always be exactly like that, but that's what we try to do, and that is what we do most of the time. For phase 2, it's again very important to know that it's only open to phase 1 awardees. So there's no straight to phase 2. And so the timeline for that is it's usually released in December. And then the deadline is, this says April, it's March or April. Probably it'll be March of 2023, actually. Panels will be held May, June in that time, and awards are made in August. Just a little review, because SBIR programs all do their award selection a little differently. There are different ways of going about it, but we do use a confidential peer review process, and we have a panel of outside experts that that review the proposals, and they come together as a panel and they discuss it. It's a very impressive process, very thorough. I think it's very fair to the awardees. These outside experts come from academia, some from industry, some from federal labs, some from nonprofits. And we also use ad hoc peer reviews panelists when we need them. All the applicants who make it to the panel through the panel process receive feedback from those reviewers. So remember that there's a roughly a 15% success rate with phase 1. So it's common if you're not funded the first year, we encourage you to reapply and use that feedback that you get from the panelists to make your proposal a little bit more competitive. So that's what that feedback is there for, to help you tweak your proposal, so to speak, and make it a little bit more competitive. So you can, as I said, you can reapply the next year. It is important to note that for phase 2, you can only apply one time. So you have, it's important for phase 2 to really make that application the very best that you can do, because you only have that one opportunity to apply for that proposal. You can go back and do a new proposal and go through phase 1 again and apply to phase 2, but for that proposal phase, you can only do phase 2 application once. Just, I want to take a minute and talk about university and government scientist involvement in USDA SBIR programs. There's a thing called a CRADA, which is a cooperative research and development agreement that you can have with a federal or US or USDA lab, and you can license to a USD innovation. Scientists can serve either as consultants or subcontractors, and without affecting their full-time work at their home institution. For phase 1, they're limited to 1/3 of the award. For phase 2, they're limited to 1/2 of the award. Scientists also have the option of serving as the PI, but in order to do that, they have to reduce their employment at their home institution to 49% or less for the duration of the grant. So those are some options of ways to use scientists, which are usually vital to SBIR. And then it's also important to know, as you develop your proposal, that it's not usually acceptable for the scientists to, for university or government scientists to serve as consultants, to use their own labs for the SBIR project. So they have to make arrangements for a different lab. Credit agreements are unique in that they actually give you your proposal a distinct advantage. So in the event that the panel has 2 proposals that they have judged to be of equal merit, if one of them has a CRADA, that will give them an advantage. So CRADAs are really great things to have. They, you don't have to pay for the lab costs. The only thing you have to pay for is if you need a piece of equipment that the lab doesn't have. I will say, if you are considering applying for a USDA SBIR phase 1 this year, it would be, and you're interested in a credit agreement, now would be a good time to start. It does take a while to develop them. So I would really encourage you to look into it now, beginning now. The next few slides talk about some factors that improve your chances of award success. Having that high scientific technical merit along with strong commercial potential is really kind of the essence of SBIR grants. We do not at USDA shy away at all from high risk, high reward proposals. So we realize that small business is often the catalyst behind disruption in technology and technological sectors, and we want to support that. So if you if you feel like your project is high risk, high reward, don't think that that is going to be a negative. It will not be considered a negative. It's a positive, actually. But we fund all types of proposals, whatever is going to benefit the topic area and ultimately the American public is what we're looking for. So having also good consultants, thinking about a credit agreement, having demonstrating in your proposal that you have some business expertise on your team, so somebody who can help with that commercialization. And then strong letters of support. Letters of support are really quite important. So if you can get 2 or 3 letters of support, maybe even 4 letters of support from end users, investors or customers, eventually that is really a very good thing to have in your proposal. And then demonstrate, please, if you would, that you have a clear understanding of how you're going to enter the market with your innovation. And then once you're in the market, how you're going to be able to sustain it. So those are some things to consider as you're writing your proposal. And then there's just the steps, the government hoops you have to go through, so to speak, to get your proposal out there. So first you have to register with SBIR.gov. So that's step 1. And then you want to get registered on grants.gov. And in order to get registered on grants.gov, you have to register with SAM.gov. And that can take a little while. That can take, 7 weeks or more. Hopefully, usually it doesn't. But if you're not registered with SAM.gov, or then now would be a good time just to go ahead and do that. And so you'll have it. And if you are registered with SAM.gov, it's a good thing to make sure. I think you have to renew annually. So maybe check on that and see where you are with that and make sure that that's all in place. And then once you have that, you can create a grants.gov username and account, and you should be ready to submit. More advice for phase 1 applications. So you can contact, those 10 topic areas. You can contact the national program leader for a consult. And as I said before, if you're not sure which topic area you belong in, you feel like you are suitable for several, you can contact our SBIR NPL and talk it over with him. If you do know where you belong, then you can ask that national program leader for a consult. And it varies among national program leaders, but maybe a 15 to 20 minute consult is offered. And what I say, this is my advice only, you don't have to do it this way, but if you can just write a brief, informal summary, like 1 paragraph summary within an email of what your project is, and then ask for to arrange some time with the national program leader, that gives them a little time to think about, to get in that headspace of where you're at before you actually talk to them. It's very important to follow the application guidelines for format, page limits, and required documents. Every year, we have people who go over the number of pages, or they don't get all the essential documents attached to their application, and those cannot even make it to panel. So those things are really important. And then make sure in your proposal that you respond to all the review criteria that's listed in the RFA. Reading the RFA is so important. There's just so much information in there, and I know it's tedious. I understand that, but if you just download a copy of it and make it searchable. I know you can search it online, but it might be a little easier just to download it and search it. Again, the new publication is expected in July. If you want to get a look at what the RFA looks like, something similar, you can go to our website and download last year's RFA, but don't use it to apply for this FY23 because the formatting will be different. But you can use it to look at more depth in the topic areas because they're not going to really change. And you can use it to see, what is expected, like I said, what you should include in your proposal. So it has some valuable information in there. Just be sure to get the updated one when it's released, which hopefully is, again, going to be July. So as you're writing your proposal, if you could just take a brief moment for the panelists to provide a vision. Tell us your dream. Tell them, where you see your innovation going to market. What is the opportunity? Who is going to buy it? Who is going to use it? And then, from there, focus on the critical enabling factors. And then align your project with the USDA priorities, which you will also find in the RFA. That's pretty important to just talk about how they're aligned. You do need to provide a detailed experimental plan that includes proprietary information. We're very good at keeping those secure, so you don't have to worry about that. But think of it this way, the panelists cannot really assess your proposal unless they have that detailed experimental plan that will have to include proprietary information. So it's to your benefit to include that. And then, provide some insight for even in phase 1 to the commercial potential, and then using that connectivity with the communities that your innovations can serve, such as those letters of support. Those things are quite important. Some places where you can get application assistance include small business development centers. There are lots of them. There are one in every state. There's 62 in total. And this is the website where you can access the small business development centers. There are also FAST programs, federal and state technology partnership programs, and they provide funding to help increase the number of SBIR awards from women and socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, as well as small businesses in underrepresented areas, which are typically rural states. These are great programs, and that is the link to find out about a FAST program in your area. There are also SBA growth accelerators. This website to find local assistance for SBIR proposals is my personal favorite because it includes all the organizations that support SBIR applicants in various ways. So you just can go to that website, put your state in, and it'll populate with all the organizations that can provide you some assistance. I'm just going to take a couple minutes and give you just a little sampling of some success stories for USDA SBIR. And again, this is just a tiny sample. We have Prairie Aqua. So this was a natural process to convert soybean meal to fish feed using microbial enhancement. The name of the product is MePro. They've had a lot of commercialization success. They're currently producing 30,000 tons of MePro, and they've commissioned a 30,000 square foot facility in 2019 because they needed to scale up their production. So they've had a lot of great success. We're very proud of them. Sunsite Win, This is the founder is Dr. Devin McIntosh, and he is in Lawrenceville, Georgia. He's had 7 grants for SBIR for USDA, and that range from 2002 to 2014. And what his innovation is to are these small wind turbines that can compete with rooftop solar, and even happens in areas with moderate wind speeds. So this is a really exciting technology. He's in the process of commercializing it, and we're very excited about his innovation. In Brex, this is an older one, but we include it because of just how big it was. They developed a higher throughput, superior technology for oboe vaccination, and that technology provided benefits to enhance efficiency and bird performance. So in 2001, they had $44 million in revenue, and they were ultimately purchased by Pfizer. We have a brand new SBIR brochure, and this is the link to it. It's on our website. If you go to our website, you can find it that way also. Again, I'm Melinda Kaufman. I'm the SBIR program coordinator, and this is also an email, sbir@usda.gov, that you can get information if you need it. On the other side of the screen is our website. I hope you will go there and look around. There's a lot of information there. And I thank you for taking the time to listen.
Great. Thank you so much, Melinda. That was a lot of good information. I have one question from Rachel. She asks, does the high risk, high reward also include low technology readiness level acceptance, low TRLs for SBIRs?
Rachel, could you maybe come off mic and talk a little bit, elaborate a little bit on your question? Would you mind?
Yeah, sure, no worries. So I'm Rachel, I'm from Visitus Technologies. We're actually work with satellite technologies and with swarms. And in the past, we have also heard that the SBIRs and STTRs are interested in high risk and high rewards. However, our technology is quite low. And so I wonder, is that something that you guys look at? Is that a deterrent sometimes for your guys's SBIRs?
Well, phase 1 is proof of concept. So I guess I would encourage you to apply for a phase 1 to further, test your technology, and to have a little more information about the viability of it. And from there, you can decide to go on to phase 2, or maybe, tweak it into something else and go back to a phase 1.
I see. Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's encouraging. Thanks.
I think Tim.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, in terms of what I have tried to do in the past, we have a mix of high risk and lower risk projects. In the sort of the recommended range. So we do support new technologies that, in terms of that, I think that's an old NASA scale, would be a lower readiness level. The high risk, high reward is only a small part of what I would call the scientific merit. So is the question important, and are you really well detailing how you're addressing the question can compensate for a technology that might be more new? I mean, in a lot of ways, new also is consistent with innovation. So we don't want to avoid new. It's just, there's a balance between, I guess, risk and reward.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the question. So before we take any other questions, if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat, or after our next speaker, we'll if there's time left, we'll do more Q&A. So I wanted to introduce Dr. Tim Sullivan. He's one of the NPOs that Melinda was talking about. He's a national program leader for the animal production systems at the National Institutes of Food and Aquaculture. And so because like Melinda mentioned, Hawaii does have a focus on aquaculture, we've invited him to come share about his program. So thank you. Take it away.
All right, so I'm going to give it a second. I'm not sure if it is loaded now. Can you guys see the first slide? Yes? Okay. So I guess I'll kick it off. So when I envisioned this talk, it was really about, some tips and sort of things to think about that would enable you to write a more successful proposal. But because my background is in aquaculture and aquatic animal health, and because that's the program that I work with, I'm going to talk about sort of the things that I normally tell an aquaculture applicant. But I want to point out that the common themes and the sort of underlying basis of everything I'm going to say is applicable across the other 9 SBIR priority areas. So it'll be framed in a fishy sort of way, but it can apply to just about anything, I guess, is really the takeaway. But just to set the stage for everyone, I'll talk a little bit about the aquaculture program specifically. So our focus is the development of novel technology and novel knowledge that enables the expansion of domestic aquaculture as a form of production agriculture. So under that sort of mission, we have two sort of synergistic goals. One is to address critical existing issues for what we call the traditional or existing aquaculture production areas. So things that already are produced somewhere in the US. They have an existing market, but we also focus on projects that enable the expansion or development of new systems. And that can be new types of production. So when you think about changes to pond-based aquaculture, so modified partition catfish ponds or recirculating aquaculture, so on land production, those kind of new systems, but we also can focus on new species. So whether it's new species of kelp that might have methane reduction properties, or if it's a new species of fish that might be better tuned to future growing conditions, all of those things are expanding new opportunities, so still appropriate for what we're looking to do as part of the SBIR aquaculture program. So I have 5 program priorities that I talk about in the RFA, specifically call out: reproductive efficiency, genetic improvement, integrated aquatic animal health, improved production systems and management strategies, and algal production. So one of the things I want to point out with those is that we don't call out specific species or types of production, but really we try to capture broad themes that cut across most of the areas that we see. And these are, for all the areas, these are really guides and not requirements. So these are things that would be nice, but if you have an idea that you think is stellar and doesn't fit into one of these 5 buckets, that's not a problem. I mean, these are, like I say, recommendations. And for me and for all the other program leaders, our goal is not to be prescriptive. So we don't want to, I know about certain types, I'm an expert in certain things about aquaculture. I mean, before I came to NIFA, I developed diagnostic tests for use on farms. So that's where my expertise lies. But I'm not an expert in animal feed, so I'm not going to presume that I know the ins and outs of that. So it's really up to the submitter to justify the importance of those projects. That's kind of the way to approach it, whether you're talking about aquaculture or whether you're talking about lettuce or potatoes or something else you might apply for. How do program leaders identify these priorities? And I wanted to present this a little bit because I like to coach people on, when I talk to anyone, I like to coach them on ways that they can get federal employees like myself to understand what their needs are. So we identify our priorities in a number of ways. One of the big things that we do is talk to stakeholder groups. So groups like the Pacific Shellfish Growers Association, the National Aquaculture Association, Catfish Farmers of America. Those groups, they represent the producers of those different species. They're all parts of aquaculture. And so I have meetings with them to talk about what their priorities are and how I can adjust the things that I focus on to better align with what their current needs would be. NIFA also funds, and I'll talk a little bit about the Hawaii Center in a bit, but the Regional Aquaculture Center program. So NIFA funds 5 centers around the US that focus on regional aquaculture issues. So I work with the 5 directors very closely. And so a lot of the things that they identify as important to their region funnels to me, and I rely on them as a really critical sort of information point. The federal government normally hosts a lot of listening sessions. A year ago now, the USDA hosted a series of sessions called Aquaculture is Agriculture, where we talked about different aspects of the federal role in supporting aquaculture development. So I actually led the sort of innovative products listening session, and that all sort of culminated in a white paper that talked about what the USDA does now and what we should do in the future. If you Google USDA Aquaculture is Agriculture, I believe the webinars themselves, recordings, are still available, and the white paper can be downloaded and read. And the last thing I will point out is that I have individual meetings with stakeholders. So part of my role as an NPL is to provide scientific leadership towards aquaculture and animal health. I cannot do that by myself. I mean, for the last 2 years, I've worked remotely, so I'm here in my house. And obviously, the only way my job succeeds is if I work with other people. So I am always really excited to get the opportunity to interact with people who are either producing or researching or extension agents, because by supporting them, I'm able to better accomplish what my goals are. So I was happy to see some names that I recognize, people that I have interacted with in my last 2 years here on the call today. So those meetings are really important. So if you are a stakeholder, I mean, obviously you all are, you should always feel free to reach out to NPLs, not just to talk about, this is my idea for submitting, but also to talk about, these are the people I work with, and these are things they think are important. So I usually tell people that, when you meet with me, it can always be bigger than just, does this idea make sense, or how do I fill out this form? Because you're learning from me, but I can also learn a lot from you. So I'll get off that soapbox. So a few tips for people who might be submitting proposals. And Melinda touched on a couple of these, but I'm going to emphasize some other things. The first thing is contact your program leader early. So I usually try to set up an hour-long meeting with anyone that contacts me. And I like to do the first one early, because then, once I talk with you, maybe you go out and you think about some of the things we talked about and you come up with a strategy, then you have time to maybe talk to me again and say, like, this is where we're going now. This is what we've done the last 2 months, 3 months, whatever. And, you know, that allows me the opportunity to sort of help, you know, bounce ideas off of, or say, yeah, I think the panel would latch onto that. I think they would think it was appropriate or not appropriate. So I don't really like the interactions to be one-off. I don't know. The other program leaders may be different, but that's just the way that I operate. If you haven't submitted before, one of the important things is to try to talk to someone who has experience. You know, when I first started applying to federal agencies, I was submitting by myself as my own AOR, like SBIR applicants would do. And that is a daunting thing. I mean, you have to navigate a lot of very convoluted government websites in order to submit, you know, this array of documents. You know, where possible, you should either send those documents to someone who has submitted, you know, if you have a colleague, a friend, someone you've met who can give you kind of an independent assessment. And if they have submitted in the past, then they'll be able to say, you know, yeah, that's what this kind of, you know, that's what a budget justification normally looks like. And those are the things that I think that they're going to want to read. Because as much as I would like to, I can't provide that level of support to every single person who submits. You know, Melinda talked a little bit about industry letters of support, and they are a valuable thing for program leaders and panel members, because some of the things that, you know, in terms of aquaculture, when we see projects that may be like a really novel technology, we want to know, if it's never been used in aquaculture before, are there producers who see a way for this to be put into practice? Or could they envision themselves using it? Because I was a researcher, and so being able to say, you know, if we come up with this type of, you know, robotic oyster planting device, an oyster farmer will be able to use it. They could envision themselves employing it in their farm. Because at the end of the day, we want to support the small businesses, but we also want to try to make sure those technologies are able to be used to support U.S. agriculture. CRADAs are you know, Melinda talked about it briefly. Those are working agreements with you know, if you make a CRADA with an ARS lab, those can act as a tiebreaker, because ARS is a sister agency to NIFA, and the funding for SBIR comes from levy, tax, duty on research expenditures. So research that ARS does also contributes to the awards that are made through the SBIR program. Some people don't know that, but they are sort of supporting this work in some ways, because they're we're the extramural funding agency at USDA, and they're the intramural funding agency. The last point that I will, there's 2 points that I want to make still. One is to sort of speak to the RFA. And I say that because, you know, the program leaders, one of the ways that we give guidance is meeting with people, but also writing the RFA. In our RFA language for aquaculture, we talk a lot about production efficiency. We talk about constraints on the industry. I talk a lot about viability of farm operations. So the reason I use those terms is because I know that those are things that the panel will look for and that they may emphasize when we think about the justification for a project idea. So, you know, it's important to make sure all the documents are there, but it's also really important to read the RFA language carefully, because from experience, I know that we write those in a way to try to give the applicants a good handle on the types of things that will be successful. And the last thing I'll point out is to be realistic. One of the biggest ways I see people shoot themselves in the foot is by being afraid to suggest an appropriate project because they aren't sure it's enough. So you feel like you have to have a lot of objectives and you have to say that you're going to do a ton of work because it sounds like it's worth the money that you would get. The awards that do really well are ones that are comfortable saying, this is what we need to do. And these are the few steps we have to do to get there. And just really fleshing that out strongly and just being confident and realistic in what you're going to be able to accomplish in an 8-month period. If you have a 12-month extension, it can be up to 20 months. But I always caution people that the panel is going to know if it's too much. So that a lot of panel members, actually, there are people who think that their job when you're on the panel is to point out weaknesses or point out flaws. So I tell people that the easiest thing to do if you want to get a high score is to minimize those opportunities to make a comment. Because when people have less things that they catch, then they feel really comfortable saying this is outstanding. And so being realistic and putting things forward in a transparent way is the best approach to do that. And it's also realistic about the business environment that the product or the knowledge is going to be entering into. So I tell people don't shy away from competing technology, but make it clear, like this product would be competing with this approach or this product, and these are how these things compare. This is why I think what I'm doing has leverage over this existing technique or tool or whatever it is, because that confidence is going to come across to the people that are reviewing it. So those are some sort of tips. I have 2 slides. I'm going to go really fast because I know we're coming up on a deadline. But for those of you who don't know about the Center for Tropical and Subtropical Aquaculture, this is the Regional Aquaculture Center that's supported by NIFA. It's at the University of Hawaii. The director is Cheng-Sheng Lee. And so Cheng-Sheng and the industry advisory group and the technical advisory committee that work with CTSA, they're all really great people, supportive group who are really dedicated to supporting aquaculture in Hawaii in the other insular areas. So if you are interested in aquaculture in the region, if you want to, definitely reach out to them, because I know that they're always willing to interact with people. And part of what the centers do around the country in their 5 areas is sort of build an aquaculture community. And so don't hesitate, I guess, is what I would say. The last thing I will point out is that I run a USDA listserv for aquaculture called Aqua Contacts, where I put out things like job solicitations. If there are like federal requests, or if there are industry queries or important pieces of information that stakeholder groups want me to share, then I put them out on that listserv. So if you're a aquaculture researcher or extension person or a producer and you're not yet getting this listserv, you can shoot me an email and I will add you to the roll, and you'll start getting our emails. I send out a few a month. It's really spotty. Just depends on what people request me to send out. I make no original content. It's really just, I'm the kind of a informational middleman in some ways. So with that, I will, happily take questions from anyone. And it was really a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Dr. Sullivan. That was excellent advice for, I think a lot of that applies to all SBIRs, not just USDA. So I think that was really, really important and great. Yeah, does anybody have any questions for either Melinda? Yes, Laura.
I was just wondering for clarification on letters of support. Do they have to come from US-based companies? Or
Aquaculture, but we acknowledge the fact that not all aquaculture is subsistence aquaculture or will only support a domestic market, because there are things that are produced that are for export. So we don't shy away from that. I mean, if you have an international letter of support that sort of says, if this, like, say it's shrimp, say it's like white spot resistant shrimp, I'm just spitballing, but if you have produced, growing companies in other countries that are like, if this could be produced, we would want it, we'd want to purchase it, whatever. That illustrates that there's a market for it. So it's not just, producing more fish for the United States, but it also produces jobs in the United States, even though those shrimp or something may end up in another country. Fire away, Neil.
Yeah, Tim, thank you very much. And Melinda, thank you both for your presentations. It's really helpful, even though I know the program pretty well. It's always helpful to hear some more. Tim, I'm interested in what you would see as potential collaborations for those of us out here in the far-flung outposts of the empire, for us to be able to collaborate with USDA labs. I know the Bozeman facility, the feed lab, we've worked very closely with them on a couple of other projects, but can you give us some suggestions as to other labs that are working in aquaculture areas that you think we should be talking to, just to try and help us foment the ideas that we might have?
So that's a good question. So the best set of resources would be, if you Google ARS NP 106, NP stands for National Program, it'll bring up a document that has every ARS aquaculture laboratory. Those researchers are the best link for ARS, because they're the ones that do a lot of the work. That's going to bring up people in like Stuttgart, Brian Peterson and the folks at the Cold Water Aquaculture Center in Maine, people in Seattle. So it'll bring up those folks, and those are the people that are probably most appropriate, I would think. The other thing you can do is email me. I can connect you with Caird, who is my counterpart at ARS, because he has, I think you probably know Caird. He does, yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No worries.
What was that again? You said to Google, was it ARS NP 106?
Yeah, NP 106. So that's how ARS organizes themselves. Every different like scientific area has an NP and then a number.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question of Melinda. As far as the Taba funds go, is that something you need to request, or is it automatically added on?
I'm sorry, what was the first part?
For the Taba funds, the technical and business assistance, is that automatic?
Yeah, no, it is different for phase 1 and phase 2, and that can be confusing. So for phase 1, we have an in-house Taba provider, so you can choose that if you're awarded, after you're awarded. But you can also choose your own Taba provider. And if you do that, then you need to include it as part of your application. So you can choose an organization that provides Taba. There's lots of them out there, or you can pull together your own Taba. And this is for phase one. So for instance, recently someone pulled together a CPA and a marketer to use their $6,500 worth of Taba, but you have to have that all outlined. Otherwise, for phase one, you can use the in-house. Phase two is completely different. You have to have that all lined up with your application. So that's $50,000. And so you have to make your choices whether you go with an organization that provides Taba or whether you're going to pull together your own. It has to be included in your budget, included in your application. There's no going back once you submit the phase two.
Okay, great. I know that's such a great program and funding.
Yes, I know. I'm glad you asked that though, because it can get confusing because they're so different.
Yeah, and if you don't ask for it, then it's a loss.
Yes. Yeah.
Hopefully that's it for everybody's questions. Thank you everybody for joining us. Don't forget we have our conference in October. Reach out to us if you need anything. I'll be sending out the webinar as well as the slide decks. Thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Solomon and Melinda. It was really great to hear your talks. So informative, and I'm glad everybody got to hear it. So take care, keep safe, and we'll see you next time. Hopefully we'll see you in Hawaii soon. Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.